Hello, fellow movie enthusiasts. Get ready to explore a gripping tale of survival and resilience with the 2000 classic, Cast Away. This film isn't just about battling the elements, it's about the inner struggle that comes when you're pushed to your absolute limits. Imagine being stranded on a deserted island, with no one to rely on but yourself. Could you survive? Cast Away immerses you in the heart-wrenching journey of one man's fight against the unforgiving forces of nature and his own deepest fears. If you're a fan of intense survival stories that peel back the layers of the human mind, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and hit the bell to stay updated on more captivating movie recaps and reviews. And hey, drop a comment below. Let me know which movie you'd love to see recapped next. Let's dive into this unforgettable story. Chuck Noland, a systems engineer for Federal Express, is in Moscow demonstrating FedEx's operational procedures to the local staff. He emphasizes the critical importance of punctuality in package sorting, explaining that it must be completed precisely on schedule. To illustrate his point, Chuck opens a package he sent to himself from FedEx's headquarters in Memphis, Tennessee, which contains a small stopwatch. He stops it at 87 hours, expressing disappointment at the delivery time, which he deems unacceptable given FedEx's core business strategy of overnight delivery. As Chuck raises his voice to emphasize the importance of timeliness, the interpreter recalls an old incident where Chuck reportedly stole a child's bike when his delivery van broke down. Chuck firmly denies this, clarifying that he merely borrowed the bike and still managed to complete his deliveries on time. Chuck then sets the team to work on sorting the packages with a strict time limit of 3 hours. However, with just 15 minutes left, their progress is hampered when one of the Moscow office's trucks is immobilized in Red Square. After resolving the issue, Chuck calls his girlfriend, Kelly, and leaves a message, letting her know that he'll be home in 24 hours and that he needs to see a dentist for a troublesome tooth that has been bothering him for a while. Once the sorting is complete and Chuck is back at the airport, he speaks with his coworker and friend, Stan. One of the crew members inquires about Stan's wife, who is battling cancer, casting a somber mood over the conversation. Chuck becomes reflective, clearly affected by the news, before heading back to Memphis. Upon his return to FedEx headquarters in Memphis, Chuck visits Kelly. During Christmas Eve dinner with her family, Chuck receives an urgent message from work, requiring him to travel to Malaysia. They drive to the airport for his departure, and before parting ways, they exchange Christmas gifts. Chuck gives Kelly a set of kitchen items, while she presents him with an antique pocket watch that belonged to her grandfather. Inside the watch is a photo of Kelly, a gesture Chuck deeply appreciates. He promises her that he'll always keep the watch set to Memphis time, a reminder to return home. Just before boarding his flight, Chuck surprises Kelly with an engagement ring, revealing that he had planned to propose on New Year's Eve, but decided to do it earlier. He reassures her that he'll be back soon, before taking his seat as the only passenger in the jump seat of a FedEx cargo plane. Across the Pacific Ocean, Chuck Noland is abruptly awakened by severe turbulence as the FedEx cargo plane encounters a fierce storm. Despite the pilot's efforts to navigate around the storm, they lose radio contact near Fiji. Chuck heads to the bathroom to freshen up, but suddenly, the door is blown open and he is nearly sucked out of the plane due to depressurization. Struggling to regain his footing, Chuck manages to return to his seat, where a crew member hands him a life raft. The plane spirals out of control and crashes into the ocean. Water floods the fuselage, and in a flash of panic, Chuck fights his way to the surface, inflates the life raft, and climbs aboard. He watches in horror as one of the plane's engines explodes before losing consciousness. When he awakens, he finds himself washed ashore on a small, isolated tropical island. Upon regaining his senses, Chuck quickly realizes that his pager is waterlogged and that Kelly's watch is ruined. As he surveys his surroundings, the absence of other survivors becomes evident, though the sound of falling coconuts briefly tricks him into believing someone else might be on the island. Desperate for food and fresh water, Chuck struggles to open coconuts, trying and failing by smashing them against large rocks. Eventually, he uses a sharp rock to cut through the tough shell. He also manages to spear small crabs, but without fire to cook them, they offer little nourishment. As he explores the island further, Chuck discovers a small cave within the rocky terrain and stumbles upon 11 FedEx packages that have washed ashore. Tragically, he also finds the body of one of the aircraft's pilots, whom he respectfully buries on the beach. That night, Chuck spots the distant lights of a ship and, using a small flashlight he retrieved from the pilot's body, desperately tries to signal it. Unfortunately, his attempts go unnoticed. The following morning, Chuck attempts to leave the island using the inflatable raft from the plane. However, the high breakers over the coral reef surrounding the island capsize the raft, tossing him onto the sharp coral and leaving his thigh badly injured. As he recovers from the accident, Chuck sets about establishing a small camp and begins opening the FedEx parcels. Inside, he finds various items that prove useful for his survival, including a pair of ice skates, a leather and lace dress, videotapes, and a legal document declaring a divorce. One of the parcels contains a volleyball, which soon becomes his unlikely companion. For reasons unknown, Chuck leaves one package unopened. It is adorned with a pair of wings. Struggling to make fire by rubbing a stick against a piece of wood, Chuck injures his hand. In a fit of frustration, he hurls the volleyball, leaving a bloody handprint on its surface. Seeing this, Chuck draws a face on the ball and names it Wilson after the brand. Over time, Wilson becomes Chuck's constant companion, a silent partner in his struggle for survival. Sometime later, Chuck explains to Wilson the flight path of his plane compared to its last known position. He calculates that the search area spans over 500,000 square miles, twice the size of Texas. Realizing the improbability of being found, he comes to terms with the harsh reality of his situation. Using the lace from the dress as a makeshift fishing net, Chuck catches a small minnow and eats it raw. He also spends countless hours attempting to create fire by rubbing two sticks together. Despite the frustrating process, Chuck perseveres, refining his technique until he finally succeeds in igniting a large fire. Chuck makes his home in a small cave, which offers protection from the storms that occasionally batter the island. However, he continues to suffer from the toothache that had bothered him before leaving Memphis. The pain intensifies as the tooth turns into a painful abscess. Desperate, Chuck resorts to a brutal solution. Using the sharp edge of an ice skate blade and a rock as a hammer, he painfully extracts the tooth. For years pass. Chuck has lost over 50 pounds, and his hair and beard have grown long and unkempt. Survival is his daily routine. During the storm, two walls from a broken fiberglass portable toilet wash ashore. Seeing it blown by the wind, Chuck is suddenly struck with the idea of building a raft. He plans to use the fiberglass walls as a makeshift sail that could help him navigate the large waves surrounding the island. Determined, Chuck chops down trees and constructs his raft, tying the logs together with braided rope made from tree bark and videotape. He meticulously counts the days needed to catch the northeast trade winds that he hopes will carry him into shipping lanes and toward rescue. Although he isn't certain where the journey will take him, Chuck decides he'd rather die at sea than spend the rest of his life alone on the island. At one point, Chuck imagines that Wilson warns him the raft arrangement won't work, and in frustration, he kicks Wilson out of the cave. Immediately regretful, Chuck rushes outside, finds Wilson, and apologizes. Later, Chuck prepares food, water, and other necessities for his escape. He also tells Wilson that he'll need to make more rope. Chuck cuts down saplings and peels their bark to braid into rope. Once he's exhausted the island's supply of saplings, he reluctantly decides to use the rope he had made years earlier when contemplating suicide. Climbing to the highest point on the island, he retrieves the rope, which he had previously tested with a crude dummy. With his preparations complete, Chuck ties Wilson and the unopened FedEx package decorated with wings to the raft. Using the new sail and a pair of makeshift oars, he manages to navigate past the reef and escape the island's lagoon. He sails for days, weathering storms, using the sail as a shelter, and continuing to fish and collect rainwater to survive. One day, after a heavy storm, Chuck is awakened by water splashing his face, apparently from a whale's spout. To his horror, he sees Wilson floating away. Torn between rescuing Wilson and staying with the raft, Chuck is forced to let Wilson go. Heartbroken, he nearly loses hope. But soon after, he is awakened by another whale spout and turns to see a container ship passing close by. The crew signals that they have spotted him. A month later, Chuck is flown back to Memphis and is the guest of honor at a large, company-organized welcome reception. On the plane home, he speaks with Stan, who tells Chuck that a funeral was held for him, with a coffin filled with small mementos in his honor. Tragically, Stan's wife passed away during Chuck's absence, leaving Chuck to reflect on how Stan had to endure the pain of two funerals. At the farewell event, attended by FedEx's president, Chuck gazes thoughtfully at the large crab legs being served, perhaps recalling his struggles to catch crabs on the island. Kelly intended to meet Chuck at the celebration, but she felt deeply uncomfortable, still grappling with the belief that Chuck had died. She has since married a dentist. Her husband, who apologizes for her absence, explains that Kelly is struggling to cope with Chuck's sudden reappearance and asks Chuck to give her more time. Through a window, Chuck sees Kelly in tears, being comforted by her husband. Later that evening, Chuck takes a taxi to Kelly's home. She seems to be expecting him and invites him inside. They talk about small things, and Chuck realizes how much her life and ambitions have changed, and how she coped with his presumed death. Chuck returns the watch she had given him, saying it belongs in her family. Kelly explains that the company presumed a hazardous package caught fire, causing the crash. She shows him a map revealing that his island was more than 600 miles from the Cook Islands, where the search had been conducted, and that he had drifted 500 miles on his raft before being found. Chuck decides to keep her picture, and Kelly gives him the keys to his Jeep, which she had kept for him. They apologize to each other for all that has happened, and Chuck drives off slowly in the rain. Suddenly, Kelly runs after him, shouting his name. He backs up, and they embrace fiercely in the pouring rain. Kelly tells him that she always believed he was alive, even though others insisted she move on. She confesses that he's the love of her life, and he tells her he loves her too. They talk for a few more minutes in his car, but Chuck ultimately tells Kelly she needs to go home, showing his respect for her decision to move on with her life. Later, Chuck talks to Stan about his meeting with Kelly. He acknowledges that while they will always love each other, their lives have taken different paths, and they cannot be together. Chuck confesses the despair and helplessness he felt on the island, describing his failed suicide attempt and how he eventually came to terms with his loneliness. Although he feels the pain of losing her again, he accepts that he must take life one day at a time, understanding that you never know what life will bring. Chuck then drives to Texas with the FedEx package decorated with wings in his Jeep. He attempts to deliver it at a ranch with a wrought iron gate labeled Patina, but finding no one there, he leaves it at the door with a note stating that the parcel saved his life. As he drives south, he stops at a four-way intersection and steps out of his car to consult a map. A friendly woman in an old pickup truck stops and asks if he is lost. Smiling, he admits that he hasn't decided where he's going. She tells him where the four roads lead, mentioning that the road north, the one Chuck had just traveled, leads to a whole lot of nothing all the way to Canada. As she drives away, Chuck notices the same pair of wings that were on the package painted on the tailgate of her truck. The movie concludes as Chuck stands at the center of the intersection, looking thoughtfully in each direction. After a moment, he turns his gaze north, the same direction the woman had driven, contemplating the road ahead with renewed purpose and the possibility of a new journey. Castaway is far more than a mere survival film. It's a deep dive into the essence of the human spirit. Tom Hanks delivers a truly unforgettable performance as Chuck Noland, capturing the raw emotions of isolation, desperation, and the relentless drive to survive. The film masterfully balances the suspense of survival with a poignant exploration of what it means to be human. It's a powerful reminder of resilience and the unbreakable need for connection, even in the darkest of times. If you're captivated by intense survival stories that explore the depths of the human psyche, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss out on more compelling movie recaps and reviews. What are your thoughts on Castaway? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.